Welcome to HOA boardroom battles. This one escalated fast at the mailbox cluster. "I am calling security right now," Patricia shouted, jabbing her finger at a printed spreadsheet that made no sense. She pointed at a timestamp mismatch and yelled that my eyes were lying and her records were right. The sheet showed a violation from 3 years ago, a parking complaint I had never received, never paid, and honestly never heard about until she ambushed me in my driveway 10 minutes ago. She stood between me and my truck, waving the paper like it was a warrant, her black windbreaker snapping in the sudden gusts that whipped loose papers and spark yelling. I kept my voice level. "That timestamp says 2:15 in the afternoon. I was at work." She cut me off. "I have all day, and so does my fine meter." Her smile was thin and sharp. "The Preserve at Oak Grove Community Association does not make mistakes. You do. I work as a park ranger, which means I value quiet and rules that make sense. Milwaukee winters teach you patience, but Patricia Brown, HOA president and self-appointed enforcement queen, had no patience and no interest in sense. She just had a tabbed binder under her arm, a glove box envelope of certified slips with no readable text stuffed in her windbreaker pocket, and a phone she kept checking like she was waiting for backup. I could see my reflection in her oversized sunglasses. I looked tired. I was recovering from an injury, a bad fall on ice 2 months back that left me with a bum knee and a limp I was still working through. She knew that. Everyone in the subdivision knew that. And she was exploiting my limited mobility by forcing me to stand here, in my own driveway, defending myself against a violation that supposedly happened when I was 60 miles away at a state park orientation. I pulled out my phone and opened my work calendar. Here, February 14th, 2022. I was at Kettle Moraine all day, logged in at 7:30, out at 5. She did not even look. "Your calendar is not proof. Our records are proof." She tapped the spreadsheet. "You were cited at 2:15 for parking a commercial vehicle in a residential zone. The fine was $50. You never paid. Now it is $200 with late fees." I stared at her. "I do not own a commercial vehicle. I drive a Subaru." She shrugged. "Then someone else parked it, and you are responsible because it was your assigned spot. That is how enforcement works." I asked to see the original notice. She said it was filed. I asked where. She said archived. I asked for a copy. She said records requests take 10 business days and a $15 processing fee. I said fine, I will pay the fee. She said the request form has to be notarized. I said that is not in the bylaws. She said it is in the updated procedures manual. I asked to see the manual. She said it is available at the office during business hours. I said I work during business hours. She said that is not her problem. Then she turned and walked back to her car, a white sedan with a magnetic HOA sign stuck to the door, and drove off. The whole exchange took less than 5 minutes. She left me standing there with a violation I could not disprove and a process designed to make sure I never could. I limped inside, grabbed my laptop, and pulled up the HOA portal. The Preserve at Oak Grove Community Association runs a supposedly transparent online system where residents can view notices, minutes, and financials. I logged in and searched for my address. Nothing. No parking citation. No violation history. I searched by date. Nothing. I searched by violation type. The parking category was empty. I took a screenshot, then another. Then I started taking screenshots of everything. The empty search results, the audit log that showed no entries for my address in 2022, the contact page that listed Patricia Brown as the sole records custodian. I saved them all to a folder and labeled it cold case. Because that is what this was, a cold case. 3 years ago, someone in this neighborhood got hit with a fake violation, or a real violation that was never recorded, or a violation that was deleted after the fact. And now it was back, targeting me, with a $200 price tag and a record system that had been scrubbed clean. I had no idea who was behind it back then. But I had a pretty good guess who was behind it now. Patricia Brown had been HOA president for 5 years. Before that, she was vice president for 3. She ran unopposed in every election because no one wanted the job, and she made it clear she would make life hell for anyone who challenged her. She lived 2 streets over in a house with a perfect lawn, a doorbell camera aimed at the street, and a reputation for selective enforcement that ramped up the moment you pushed back. If you kept your head down, paid your dues, and did not ask questions, she left you alone. If you asked questions, she found violations. Lots of them. Suddenly your trash cans were too visible. Your mailbox was the wrong shade of black. Your holiday lights stayed up one day too long. And if you kept pushing, things escalated. Fines became liens. Liens became lawyer letters. Lawyer letters became foreclosure threats. She had a whole system, and it worked because most people did not have the time, money, or energy to fight. But I had time. I was on medical leave. I had energy, because sitting around doing nothing was driving me crazy. And I had a very specific skill set. I spend my days documenting rule violations in state parks, writing incident reports, and dealing with people who think the rules do not apply to them. Patricia Brown was just another rule breaker. She just happened to be the one writing the rules. I started with the records request. I printed the form from the HOA website, filled it out, and drove to a notary at the UPS store. $10 and 5 minutes later, I had a signed stamped request for all parking violation records at my address from 2020 through 2025. I mailed it certified, return receipt requested, and I took a photo of the envelope before I dropped it in the slot. Then I drove to the county clerk and pulled the subdivision plat, the original HOA bylaws, and the Articles of Incorporation for the Preserve at Oak Grove Community Association. I paid $6 for copies and spread them out on my kitchen table. The bylaws were clear. Residents had a right to inspect all association records within 5 business days of a written request. No notarization required. No processing fee allowed. The procedures manual Patricia kept citing did not exist in any filed document. She made it up. Or she filed it somewhere I could not see. Either way, it was not enforceable. I made a note and kept reading. The bylaws also said violations had to be delivered in writing within 72 hours of the incident. No retroactive fines. No backdating. If a violation was not documented at the time, it did not exist. I made another note. Then I found the kicker. All enforcement actions had to be approved by a majority vote of the board. Patricia could not issue fines on her own. She needed at least 2 other board members to sign off. I checked the current board roster on the HOA website. 3 members total. Patricia Brown, President. Michael Cho, Treasurer. Dana Whitfield, Secretary. I did not know Michael or Dana. I did not know if they were enablers or hostages, but I knew they were supposed to be voting on every fine Patricia issued. I doubted they were. 5 business days later, I got a response. Not the records. A denial. Patricia sent a single-page letter on HOA letterhead, unsigned, with a line that said my request was denied because it cited a policy they would not show me. The reason given, requests for archived enforcement records require board approval, and the board meets quarterly. Next meeting is in August. It was April. I had 4 months to wait. Or I could pay the fine and make it go away. I did not pay the fine. Instead, I called Michael Cho. I found his number on the HOA website under board contact. He answered on the 3rd ring, sounded confused, and said he had no idea what I was talking about. He did not know anything about a parking violation at my address. He did not remember voting on any fines in 2022. He said Patricia handles day-to-day enforcement and brings issues to the board when they are complicated. I asked if he had signed off on my $200 fine. He said he had not seen any paperwork. I thanked him and hung up. Then I called Dana Whitfield. She did not answer. I left a voicemail. She did not call back. I spent the next 2 days pulling everything I could find on Patricia. Property records, business licenses, court filings. I found 3 small claims cases where she had sued residents for unpaid fines. All three settled. I found one case where a resident sued her for harassment. Dismissed. I found a Better Business Bureau complaint from a tow company that said Patricia had tried to force them to tow cars without proper authorization and threatened to blacklist them when they refused. The complaint was closed as resolved. No details. I saved the screenshots and added them to my folder. Then I found the smoking gun, or the first piece of it. I was digging through old HOA meeting minutes posted on the portal, looking for any mention of parking enforcement policy changes, when I noticed something weird. The March 2022 minutes were posted twice. Same meeting date. Different files. I downloaded both. The first version was a 2-page PDF with standard agenda items, budget review, landscaping contract, next meeting date. The second version was 4 pages. Same agenda, same date, but with 2 additional sections, a parking enforcement policy update and a vote to authorize the president to issue fines up to $500 without board approval. The vote passed 3-0, according to the minutes. But Michael Cho told me he never voted on any parking enforcement changes, and Dana Whitfield was not responding. I printed both versions, highlighted the differences, and put them in a tab binder. Then I called the management company listed on the HOA website. I got a receptionist who transferred me to a property manager named Liz. I explained the situation. She sounded tired. She said Patricia had been difficult to work with, that the company had considered dropping the account, but Patricia always paid on time and the board backed her. I asked if the management company kept copies of the meeting minutes. She said they did. I asked if she could send me the March 2022 minutes. She said she would check and call me back. She called back an hour later. She sounded nervous. She said the file the management company had on record matched the first version, the 2-page version. The 4-page version with the parking policy vote did not exist in their system. Someone added it to the portal after the fact. She would not say who. But I knew. I now had proof that Patricia had altered official HOA records to give herself unilateral enforcement power. That was fraud. Maybe not criminal fraud, depending on how Wisconsin HOA law shook out, but definitely grounds for removal and probably grounds for a lawsuit. I also had proof that the parking violation she was trying to collect on me was issued under a fake policy that never existed. That made the fine void. But I still did not have the original notice. I did not have the photo evidence. I did not have the complaint that supposedly triggered the violation. And I did not have any way to prove that Patricia was the one who forged the second version of the minutes, unless I could find someone who was there. I sent another email to Dana Whitfield, subject line, March 2022 meeting minutes discrepancy. I attached both PDFs. I asked her if she remembered voting on a parking enforcement policy change. I said I was not trying to cause trouble. I just wanted to understand what happened. I did not expect a response. I got one in 20 minutes. She said she did not remember voting on any parking policy. She said she had not attended the March 2022 meeting because she was out of town. She said Patricia told her the meeting was canceled and they would reschedule. But the minutes said the meeting happened and she was marked present. She was furious. She said she was going to talk to Michael and figure out what was going on. 2 hours later, Michael Cho called me. He said Dana had forwarded my email and they had just spent an hour comparing notes. Neither of them had attended the March meeting. Neither of them had voted on anything. Patricia had held the meeting by herself, recorded fake votes, and posted fake minutes. She had been doing it for years, and now that they were looking, they were finding more. Budget votes that never happened, contractor approvals that were never discussed, policy changes that appeared out of nowhere. Michael said he was done. He was going to resign. Dana said she was going to file a complaint with the state. I said I had a better idea. I said we should reopen every case Patricia had touched in the last 3 years and see how deep the fraud went. They agreed. We set up a meeting for that weekend at a coffee shop in Wauwatosa, outside the subdivision. Michael brought a laptop with every HOA email he had ever received from Patricia. Dana brought a file box with paper copies of every notice, fine, and meeting packet she had kept. I brought my tab binder and a printed timeline. We spent 4 hours going through everything. The pattern was clear. Patricia would issue a violation, usually for something petty and hard to disprove. She would send a notice with a short deadline. If the resident paid, she pocketed the fine and never recorded it. If the resident pushed back, she escalated, added late fees, threatened liens, sent certified letters. Most people paid. A few fought and lost because they did not have proof. One family moved out. Another sold their house at a loss just to get away from her. And the whole time, she was altering records, forging votes, and threatening vendors who would not cooperate. We counted at least 12 families who had been targeted, maybe more. We did not have access to the full financial records, but we had enough to know this was not a few mistakes. This was a system. Dana asked what we should do. Michael said we should go to the police. I said the police would tell us it was a civil matter and we should hire a lawyer. Dana said we could not afford a lawyer. I said we did not need one. We just needed to force Patricia into a corner where she could not lie her way out. And I had an idea. The HOA board packet was being finalized that afternoon, and I had to get my evidence included before it was sealed. The next quarterly meeting was in 2 weeks. If we could get our findings into the official packet, every homeowner in the subdivision would see it. Patricia could not delete it or bury it. It would be public record. And once it was public, she would have no choice but to respond. Michael said he could submit an agenda item as treasurer. Dana said she could second it as secretary. I said I would write the report. We had 3 hours. I went home and wrote the fastest, cleanest summary I have ever written, 2 pages. No emotion, just facts. Meeting minutes altered, votes forged, fines issued without board approval, vendor intimidation. Selective enforcement. I cited dates, amounts, and specific violations. I attached the 2 versions of the March 2022 minutes as exhibits. I attached email screenshots showing Patricia threatening the tow company. I attached my own records request denial. I sent the draft to Michael and Dana. They approved it. Michael submitted it to the management company at 4:58, 2 minutes before the deadline. The property manager, Liz, called him back 10 minutes later and said the packet was locked in printing. Our report was in. Patricia called me that night. She did not yell. She did not threaten. She just said very calmly that I was making a mistake. She said the board report was defamatory and she was going to sue me for damages. She said I had no idea what I was doing and I was going to regret it. Then she hung up. I saved the call log and added it to the binder. The next morning I got a knock on my door. It was a man in a reflective vest holding a clipboard. He said he was from the HOA compliance inspection team and he needed to do a walkthrough of my property. I asked to see his credentials. He showed me a laminated card with Patricia's signature and the HOA logo. I asked who hired him. He said the HOA president. I said I wanted to see the inspection request in writing. He said it was standard procedure. I said I was not letting him on my property without documentation. He got annoyed. He said I was being difficult and he had 12 other properties to inspect today. I said that was fine, he could come back when he had paperwork. He walked back to his truck, made a phone call and drove off. 5 minutes later, Patricia called me again. This time she yelled. She said I was obstructing official HOA business and she was adding a $500 obstruction fine to my account. I said I would see her at the meeting. She hung up. I checked my phone. Battery at 18%. I had been recording non-stop since the coffee shop meeting, and my phone battery drops at the worst moment because I have been recording non-stop. I plugged it in and opened the Notes app. I made a list of everything I still needed: the original parking violation notice, the photo evidence Patricia claimed to have, and any proof that she had pocketed fines instead of depositing them into the HOA account. Michael had access to the bank statements as treasurer, but only recent ones. Anything older than 2 years required a formal records request, which Patricia would block. Dana had receipt copies from a few residents who paid fines in cash, but not enough to prove a pattern. I needed someone who had been hit by Patricia early, someone who kept records, someone who was still angry enough to help. I found him through a neighborhood Facebook group. His name was Tom Hendricks. He posted a rant in 2021 about an HOA shakedown over a mailbox paint color. The thread was long and angry, and Tom had posted photos of every notice, every email, and every certified letter Patricia sent him. He eventually paid the fine, $300, but he never forgot. I sent him a private message. He responded in 5 minutes. He said he was in, and he had more than just mailbox notices. He had photos. He had timestamps. He had proof that Patricia backdated a violation to make it look like he had ignored warnings. And he had the original notice she sent, the one that did not match the version she filed with the management company. He offered to meet me that afternoon. Tom lived 3 blocks away. He met me at his front door holding a manila folder stuffed with papers. He did not invite me in. He just handed me the folder and said, "Burn her down." Inside was everything. The original notice Patricia hand-delivered in March 2021, citing a mailbox violation. The certified letter she sent 2 weeks later, claiming he had ignored 3 prior warnings. The email chain where Tom asked to see the prior warnings, and Patricia refused. And the kicker, a second version of the original notice, dated a month earlier, that Patricia had submitted to the management company as proof of timely notification. The 2 notices were identical, except for the date. Same paper, same printer, same signature. She had backdated it. And Tom had kept both copies because he knew something was wrong. I asked him why he paid the fine. He said his wife was pregnant and they did not need the stress. He said Patricia told him if he did not pay, she would put a lien on the house and they would not be able to refinance. He said he called a lawyer, and the lawyer said it would cost more to fight than to pay. So he paid, and he had been waiting 3 years for someone to take her down. I thanked him and added his folder to my binder. Now I had 2 cases of backdated notices. I had proof of forged meeting minutes. I had proof of vendor intimidation. And I had a board meeting in 10 days where all of it was going to go public. But I did not have the trump card yet. I did not have the one thing that would make Patricia stop lying and start running. I needed something personal. Something she could not explain away. Something that showed intent. I found it 2 days later. I was going through my doorbell camera footage, looking for the timestamp of Patricia's driveway ambush, when I saw something I had missed. After she left, after she drove off, she came back. 15 minutes later. She parked across the street and sat in her car for 10 minutes, watching my house. Then she got out, walked up to my mailbox, opened it, looked inside, closed it, and walked back to her car. She did not take anything. She did not leave anything. She just checked. And then she drove off. I rewound the footage and watched it again. Same thing. She was checking to see if I had received mail. Specifically, she was checking to see if I had received the certified letter I sent her with my records request. Because if I had not received a response, I could not prove she was blocking my access to records. And if I could not prove that, I could not prove fraud. But I could prove harassment. I could prove stalking. I could prove she was surveilling my property without cause. And I had it on video. I saved the clip, backed it up to 3 different places, and sent a copy to Michael and Dana. Dana said it was enough to file a police report. Michael said it was enough to get her removed from the board. I said it was enough to end this. I nodded like I was losing, because I wanted her to get comfortable. The next week crawled. Patricia did not call. She did not show up. She did not send any more notices. I knew she was planning something, but I did not know what. Michael said she had requested an executive session at the start of the board meeting, which meant she wanted to discuss something in private before the public portion. Dana said that was against the bylaws unless it was a personnel or legal matter. I said it did not matter. She was going to try to control the narrative before we could present our evidence. We agreed to show up early and make sure the meeting stayed on the agenda. The day before the meeting, I got another knock. This time it was not an inspector. It was Patricia. She had a man with her, also in a reflective vest holding a clipboard. She said she was conducting a compliance review and she needed to verify my vehicle registration. I asked why. She said there had been reports of unauthorized vehicles in the neighborhood. I said my car was registered and parked in my driveway. She said she needed to see proof. I said no. She said I was in violation of Section 12.4 of the HOA covenants. I said there was no Section 12.4. She pulled out a printed sheet with a letterhead and a list of rules. It was the procedures manual she kept citing, the one that did not exist in any official filing. I took a photo of it. She told me to delete the photo. I said no. She stepped closer. The man with the clipboard stepped back. I held up my phone and said, "Keep going. I am recording this." She stopped. She stared at me. Then she turned and walked back to her car. The man followed. They drove off. I saved the video and sent it to Michael and Dana. Dana said we should call the police. I said not yet. I wanted to see what she did at the meeting. That night, I could not sleep. I kept running through scenarios. Patricia would try to adjourn the meeting. Patricia would try to remove our agenda item. Patricia would try to claim executive privilege. Patricia would try to discredit the evidence. I had answers for all of it, but I did not know if the other homeowners would care. Most of them did not come to meetings. Most of them did not know what Patricia was doing. Most of them just paid their dues and hoped she would leave them alone. If the room was empty, she could railroad the vote and nothing would change. I needed people to show up. I needed them to be angry. I needed them to see what she had been doing. I spent the next morning knocking on doors. I did not have a script. I just said there is a board meeting tonight and you should come. Some people asked why. I said because the HOA president has been forging records and stealing money, and if we do not stop her tonight, she is going to keep doing it. Most people did not believe me. A few did. One woman said she had been fined for a trash can violation that never happened, and she paid it because she did not want trouble. I gave her my phone number and told her to bring her records. Another man said Patricia had threatened to tow his car because it was parked on the street during a snowstorm. He said he moved it, but she towed it anyway and made him pay the impound fee. I told him to come to the meeting and say that out loud. He said he would think about it. By 6 that evening, I had talked to maybe 20 people. I had no idea how many would show up. I drove to the meeting early. It was being held at a community center near the subdivision entrance, a plain brick building with a small meeting room and folding chairs. When I walked in, the room was half full. Michael and Dana were already there, sitting in the front row with matching file boxes. Patricia was at the head table, alone, shuffling papers. She looked up when I walked in, and for just a second, I saw something flicker across her face. Not anger, not smugness, fear. The meeting started at 7. Patricia banged a gavel, called the meeting to order, and immediately moved to enter executive session. Michael objected. He said there was no legal or personnel matter to discuss, and executive session was not allowed. Patricia said she had received complaints about board members disclosing confidential information, and she needed to address it privately. Dana said there was no such thing as confidential information in an HOA except for individual homeowner payment records, and nothing we had shared was confidential. Patricia ignored her and called for a vote. Michael voted no. Dana voted no. Patricia voted yes. The motion failed. She slammed the gavel again and moved to the agenda. The first item was Treasurer Report. Michael stood up and said he had a supplemental report to present. He pulled out a printed spreadsheet and started reading. Over the past 3 years, the HOA had issued fines totaling $42,000. Of that, only $18,000 had been deposited into the HOA account. The remaining $24,000 was unaccounted for. He had receipts from residents showing payment. He had bank statements showing deposits. The numbers did not match. He asked Patricia where the missing money went. She said the spreadsheet was inaccurate and she would provide corrected figures at the next meeting. Michael said the next meeting was 3 months away and the board had a fiduciary duty to address discrepancies immediately. He moved to suspend all enforcement actions until an independent audit could be completed. Dana seconded. Patricia said the motion was out of order. Michael said it was not. The room erupted. People started shouting. Someone yelled, "Where is my $300? Someone else yelled, "I paid twice and you said you never got it." Patricia banged the gavel and screamed for order. No one listened. Dana stood up and said she had another issue. She pulled out the 2 versions of the March 2022 meeting minutes and held them up. She said one version was filed with the management company and one version was posted on the HOA portal, and they did not match. She said the second version included votes that never happened and policies that were never approved. She said Patricia had altered official records to give herself power she did not have. She asked Patricia to explain. Patricia said the management company made a filing error and the correct version was on the portal. Dana said the management company had confirmed that their version was the original and the portal version had been uploaded later. She asked again. Patricia to explain. Patricia did not answer. She just stared at Dana with her jaw tight and her hands gripping the edge of the table. I stood up. I said I had evidence that Patricia had been issuing backdated notices, forging meeting votes, and threatening vendors to enforce violations that did not exist. I said I had proof that she had altered records to cover her tracks. I said I had proof that she had surveilled my property without cause. And I said I had it all on video. I pulled out my phone and held it up. The room went silent. Patricia stood up and said I was slandering her and she was going to have me removed. I said she could try, but the video was already backed up and distributed to multiple people. I said I had sent copies to the management company, the state HOA ombudsman, and a real estate attorney. I said if she wanted to keep lying, she could do it in front of a judge. Then I played the clip. 30 seconds. Patricia opening my mailbox. Patricia walking back to her car. Patricia sitting and watching my house. The timestamp was clear. The image was clear. There was no way to explain it away. I looked at her and said, in the calmest voice I could manage, "You came back to check if I got your denial letter. You were worried I would have proof you were blocking my records request. And now I do." Patricia did not yell. She did not argue. She just grabbed her papers, stuffed them into her tote bag, and walked out. The man with the clipboard, the one who had been with her at my house, stood up from the back row and followed her. The room stayed silent for maybe 5 seconds. Then everyone started talking at once. Michael banged the gavel and called for order. He said the board needed to vote on an emergency motion to suspend Patricia from all enforcement duties pending an investigation. Dana seconded. The vote was 2-0. Patricia absent. The motion passed. Then someone in the back yelled, "What about the money?" Michael said the board would hire an auditor and schedule a special meeting to review the findings. Someone else yelled, "What about my fine?" Dana said anyone who believed they had been wrongfully fined could submit a dispute form and the board would review it. The meeting ran another 40 minutes. By the end, we had a list of 32 residents who wanted their cases reviewed, a motion to hire an independent management company, and a motion to remove Patricia as board president. The vote to remove her required a majority of homeowners, not just the board, so it would have to wait for a special election. But she was done. Everyone knew it. I walked out of the meeting and found Patricia sitting in her car in the parking lot. She was on her phone. I did not approach. I just stood near my truck and waited. She saw me. She ended her call, got out, and walked over. She did not yell. She did not threaten. She just said, "You have no idea what you just did." I said, "I know exactly what I did. I stopped you." She laughed, but it was not a real laugh. It was bitter and sharp. She said, "You think this is over? You think the board is going to fix this? They are going to hire some management company that does not care. And in 6 months, everyone will forget. And I will still be here." I said, "No, you will not. Because I am going to make sure every family you targeted knows what you did. And I am going to make sure the state knows. And if there is criminal fraud here, I am going to make sure the police know. She stared at me. Then she got back in her car and drove off. I went home and collapsed on the couch. My phone was full of messages. Michael, Dana, Tom, the woman with the trash can fine, the man with the towed car. Everyone wanted to know what happened next. I did not have an answer yet. I just knew we had won the first round. The hard part was coming. The next morning, I got a call from Liz at the management company. She said Patricia had submitted her resignation effective immediately. She said the board would need to appoint an interim president and schedule an election within 60 days. She also said the company had conducted a preliminary review of the financials and found multiple discrepancies that would require a full forensic audit. She asked if I would be willing to provide my evidence to the auditor. I said yes. She thanked me and hung up. Then Michael called. He said he and Dana had decided to stay on the board through the transition, but they were not running in the next election. He said they were both exhausted and they just wanted to make sure the neighborhood did not fall apart before someone else could take over. I said I understood. He asked if I would consider running. I said no. I had done what I needed to do. Someone else could fix the rest. 2 weeks later, the auditor released a preliminary report. Patricia had pocketed at least $28,000 in fines over 3 years. She had also accepted kickbacks from a towing company in exchange for referring violations, and she had billed the HOA for inspection services that were never performed. The report recommended referring the case to local law enforcement for fraud investigation. The board voted to do so. A detective from the Milwaukee County Sheriff called me a few days later and asked me to come in and give a statement. I brought my binder, my phone, and every piece of evidence I had collected. The interview took 2 hours. The detective said it was one of the most well-documented cases he had seen. He said they would open an investigation and probably file charges, but it would take time. I said I was not in a hurry. If you are enjoying this story, hit that like button and subscribe for more satisfying HOA drama and neighborhood justice. The special election happened in June. A new board was elected, 3 people I did not know, but who all ran on transparency and accountability. The first thing they did was adopt an enforcement checklist that limits Karen tactics and hire a neutral hearing officer to review all disputed fines. The second thing they did was vote to refund every fine Patricia had issued without proper board approval. I got a check for $200 in the mail, along with a letter apologizing for the error. I framed the letter. Patricia did not disappear. She still lived in the neighborhood. I saw her sometimes walking her dog or getting her mail. She did not look at me. She did not speak to me. She just kept her head down and went about her business. I heard through the neighborhood rumor mill that she was facing criminal charges in a civil lawsuit from the HOA for restitution. I did not follow the case. I did not need to. I had already won. But the story did not end there. Because about 3 weeks after the election, I was sitting on my front porch with a cup of coffee when a white pickup truck pulled up in front of my house. It was the towing company, the same one Patricia had been working with. The driver got out and walked up to my driveway. He said he had an order to tow my vehicle for expired registration. I said my registration was current. He said he had paperwork that said otherwise. I asked to see it. He handed me a clipboard with a printed notice. It had Patricia's signature at the bottom. I looked at the date. It was from 2 days ago. After she resigned. After the board removed her from enforcement. After everything. I called the new board president, a woman named Sarah, who worked in IT and had no patience for nonsense. I explained the situation. She said she would handle it and hung up. 5 minutes later, the tow driver got a call. He listened, said a few words, and hung up. Then he walked back to my porch and said, "I am sorry, man. I did not know." I said, "No what?" He said, "I did not know she was not authorized anymore. She called me this morning and said it was an emergency tow. She said you were blocking a fire lane." I said, "I am in my own driveway." He said, "Yeah, I see that now." He tore up the notice and handed me the pieces. He said, "For what it is worth, I am done working with her. She burned too many people. He got back in his truck and drove off. I called Sarah back and told her what happened. She said Patricia had tried to issue the tow order using old HOA letterhead and a forged signature from the new board. Sarah said she had already contacted the towing company and told them Patricia was no longer affiliated with the HOA and any orders from her should be ignored. She also said the board was considering filing a restraining order if Patricia kept trying to interfere. I said that might be a good idea. Sarah agreed. A month later, I got a summons to appear as a witness in Patricia's criminal trial. The charges were theft by fraud, forgery, and official misconduct. I showed up on the scheduled date with my binder and my phone. The courtroom was small and mostly empty. Patricia sat at the defense table with a public defender who looked like he had just graduated law school. The prosecutor was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who walked me through my evidence step by step. I explained the backdated notices. I explained the forged meeting minutes. I explained the missing money. I played the doorbell camera footage. The jury watched in silence. Patricia did not look at me once. The trial lasted 3 days. The jury deliberated for 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. Patricia was sentenced to 18 months probation, ordered to pay full restitution to the HOA, and banned from serving on any homeowners association board in the state of Wisconsin for 10 years. The judge also imposed a no-contact order preventing her from communicating with me, Michael, Dana, or any of the other families who had testified. I walked out of the courthouse feeling lighter than I had in months. The HOA held a special meeting a few weeks later to formally close out the enforcement review process. Sarah presented the final audit, which showed a total of $34,000 in missing funds. The board voted to pursue a civil judgment against Patricia to recover the money, and they voted to implement new financial controls to prevent future fraud. They also voted to change the bylaws so that no single board member could issue fines without majority approval, and they created an appeal process so residents could challenge violations without going through the board. The vote was unanimous. The meeting ended with applause. It was the first HOA meeting I had ever attended where people were smiling. I did not run for the board. I did not volunteer for any committees. I just went back to my normal life. I went back to work at the park, finished my physical therapy, and stopped limping. I started sleeping through the night again. I stopped checking my doorbell camera every 5 minutes. I stopped waiting for the next notice, the next fine, the next ambush. It was over. Really over. But I kept the binder. I kept the screenshots, the emails, the videos, the audit reports, the court transcripts. I kept everything. Because I knew that someday, someone else in some other neighborhood was going to deal with their own Patricia. And when they did, I wanted them to know it was possible to fight back. It was possible to win. It just took patience, documentation, and the willingness to call a liar a liar. About 6 months after the trial, I was walking my usual route through the neighborhood when I saw a for sale sign in front of Patricia's house. I did not feel smug. I did not feel victorious. I just felt tired. She had done real damage to real people, and no amount of restitution or probation was going to undo that. But at least she was not doing it anymore. At least the neighborhood had a chance to heal. At least the next family who moved in would not have to deal with selective enforcement that ramps up the moment you push back. I walked past her house and kept going. I did not look back. The cold case was closed. The forged records were exposed. The missing money was accounted for. The neighborhood had new leadership, new rules, and a new chance to be the kind of place people actually wanted to live. And I had my life back. That was enough. A few weeks later, I got a message from Tom Hendricks, the guy who had given me the backdated mailbox notices. He said his wife had just had their baby, a healthy girl, and they were doing great. He said he wanted to thank me for standing up to Patricia, because if I had not, they would have been too scared to stay in the neighborhood. He said his daughter was going to grow up in a place where the rules were fair and the people in charge were honest, and that mattered. I told him congratulations and said I was glad I could help. He sent me a photo of the baby. I saved it. That same week, Dana called me. She said she and Michael were stepping down from the board at the end of their terms. But they wanted to make sure I knew how much my work had meant. She said most people would have just paid the fine and moved on, and the fact that I did not had changed everything. She said the neighborhood owed me. I said the neighborhood did not owe me anything. I just did what anyone should have done. She laughed and said that was the problem. Most people would not have. But I did, and it made all the difference. The new board sent me a thank you letter on official HOA letterhead. It was short and formal, but it was signed by all 3 board members, and it acknowledged my role in exposing the fraud and protecting the community. I did not frame that one. I just filed it in the binder with everything else. Life went back to normal. I kept working. I kept healing. I kept living in the subdivision, which was now a quieter, calmer place. The enforcement notices stopped. The certified letters stopped. The ambushes stopped. People started saying hello again. The neighborhood group chat, which had been dead for months, came back to life with posts about block parties and yard sales and snow removal schedules. It felt like a real community again. It felt like home. But every now and then I would see someone new moving into the neighborhood, and I would think about walking over and introducing myself. I would think about telling them the story, just so they knew what had happened and what could happen again if people were not paying attention. But I never did. Because the story was not a warning anymore, it was history. And history only matters if you learn from it. The Preserve at Oak Grove Community Association was not perfect. But it was better. And that was enough. One night, about a year after the trial, I was sitting on my porch watching the sunset when a car pulled up across the street. A family got out. Mom, Dad, 2 kids, a dog. They were moving into the house Patricia used to live in. The kids were laughing and chasing each other around the front yard. The dog was barking and wagging its tail. The parents were unloading boxes and smiling. It looked normal. It looked happy. It looked like the way a neighborhood should be. I watched them for a few minutes. Then I went inside, grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge, and walked over. I introduced myself. The dad shook my hand and said they were excited to be here. The mom asked if the neighborhood was nice. I thought about it for a second. Then I said, yeah, it is now. I did not tell them the full story. I did not tell them about Patricia, the forged minutes, the missing money, the tow truck, the trial. I just told them that if they ever had questions about the HOA, they could ask me or any of the board members, and we would help. I told them the rules were clear, the fees were fair, and the board was accountable. I told them it was a good place to live. And I meant it. They thanked me and went back to unpacking. I walked back to my house and sat down on the porch steps. The sun was almost gone. The street was quiet. The air smelled like fresh-cut grass in summer. I leaned back and closed my eyes. It was over. Really, truly over. And I could finally breathe again. I appreciate you sticking with me, and I will see you next time.